In the heart of Los Angeles, beneath the glow of city lights, a moment of pure humanity shattered every Hollywood stereotype. A simple act of kindness was about to change two lives forever. The sleek black Porsche slowed to a stop, its headlights cutting through the evening mist. Behind the wheel sat Keanu Reeves, but this wasn't a scene from his latest blockbuster. This was real life. A man stood in the rain, his weathered face telling stories of hardship and struggle. Plastic grocery bags hung from his calloused hands, their weight pulling at his tired arms. He never expected what happened next. The window rolled down, and there he was, one of Hollywood's biggest stars, offering something more valuable than money: dignity. The conversation that followed wasn't recorded by paparazzi cameras. No headlines splashed across entertainment news. But what transpired in those few minutes would ripple through both their lives, creating a story that needed to be told. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. One man who had everything, another who seemed to have nothing, but appearances can be deceiving. As the passenger door opened, neither man knew they were about to embark on an extraordinary evening that would challenge everything they thought they knew about fate, second chances, and the power of human connection. The homeless man hesitated, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the door handle. In that split second, both their lives hung in perfect balance. A moment of choice that would spark a chain of events no one could have predicted. What happened next left everyone who witnessed it speechless, and the story that unfolded would touch hearts across the globe. This wasn't just another celebrity encounter. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from the most unexpected places. The warm glow of sunset had long faded over Los Angeles, replaced by the cool embrace of an autumn evening. Rain drummed steadily against the pavement, creating silver rivers that flowed between the cracks of Hollywood's less glamorous streets. Keanu Reeves sat behind the wheel of his Porsche, tired but content after a grueling 14-hour day on set. The new John Wick sequence had demanded everything from him, and now all he wanted was the quiet comfort of home. Traffic lights painted the wet asphalt in alternating patterns of red and green as he navigated through the city's quieter backstreets. He preferred these routes, away from the tourist traps and paparazzi hotspots. Here, Los Angeles showed its true face. Not the polished veneer of Rodeo Drive, but the raw, honest struggle of everyday people chasing their dreams. Through the rhythmic sweep of his windshield wipers, Keanu noticed a figure struggling along the sidewalk. An older man, perhaps in his 60s, was fighting against the wind and rain, plastic grocery bags cutting into his fingers as he tried to maintain his balance. His clothes, though clearly worn, showed signs of careful maintenance. A man holding on to his dignity despite difficult circumstances. Keanu's hand moved instinctively toward the steering wheel, ready to turn it slightly and continue past, as thousands of other drivers had likely done. It was a sensible thing to do, the safe thing, but something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the way the man adjusted his load, squaring his shoulders against the weather with quiet determination. Or maybe it was a memory of his own mother's struggles when he was young, working multiple jobs to keep their family afloat. The Porsche slowed, its tires cutting smoothly through the puddles. The man didn't even look up, too focused on his careful steps and protecting his precious groceries from the rain. Keanu watched him through the passenger window, noting the slight tremor in his hands, the careful way he placed each foot despite what appeared to be worn-out shoes. Rain continued to fall, creating a private curtain around this moment. No cameras, no fans, no expectations, just two human beings and a choice. Keanu's finger found the window control, and the software of machinery broke through the steady drumming of raindrops. The man finally looked up, startled by the sound of the descending window. Their eyes met across the divide of circumstance. The homeless man's face showed a flicker of recognition, quickly replaced by wariness. He'd likely experienced his share of cruel jokes and false hopes on these streets. Keanu could see the internal debate playing across his features, the instinct to keep walking warring with desperate fatigue. "Looks like you could use a ride," Keanu said simply, his voice carrying none of the practiced polish of his movie roles. This was real, unscripted humanity. The man's grip tightened on his grocery bags, knuckles white with tension. He glanced up and down the street, as if searching for hidden cameras or waiting for the punchline of some elaborate joke. "I couldn't," he started, his voice rough but educated, hinting at a story yet untold. "You don't know me, Mr. Reeves. I'm not who I used to be." The last words carried a weight that spoke of loss, of a fall from grace that had led him to this rain-soaked moment. Keanu reached across and pushed open the passenger door. "Neither am I," he replied, a small smile softening his features. "Maybe that's why we met tonight." The door hung open between them, an invitation that represented more than just shelter from the rain. It was a bridge across the invisible barriers that usually separated their worlds, a chance to prove that kindness still existed in a city known for crushing dreams. The leather seat creaked softly as the homeless man lowered himself into the Porsche, carefully gathering his grocery bags onto his lap. The contrast was striking, his weathered clothes against the vehicle's pristine interior. Yet Keanu's relaxed posture suggested he noticed no difference. The car pulled smoothly away from the curb, wipers keeping steady rhythm against the falling rain. Several minutes passed in silence, broken only by the gentle hum of the engine and the man's occasional adjustment of his grocery bags. Keanu kept his eyes on the road, allowing his passenger the dignity of gathering his thoughts. Finally, the man cleared his throat. "My name's Thomas," he offered quietly, his voice carrying traces of refinement beneath its current roughness. "Thomas Sullivan. I used to... Well, I suppose that doesn't matter much anymore." He stared out the window, watching the city lights blur through the rain-streaked glass. Keanu nodded, taking a careful turn onto a less-traveled street. "Sometimes who we used to be matters less than who we're becoming," he replied. The words hung in the air between them, touching something deep in Thomas's expression. "That's kind of you to say," Thomas responded, his fingers absently tracing the edge of a grocery bag. "But in this city, people tend to remember who you were, especially when you've fallen." He paused, weighing his next words. "Though I admit, I never expected Keanu Reeves to be the one to prove me wrong about that." A small smile tugged at Keanu's lips. "LA's got a way of surprising you sometimes." Where are we headed? The question was casual, non-judgmental, though they both knew the answer might not be simple. Thomas hesitated, his shoulders tensing slightly. "There's a shelter on Valencia Street. They know me there." The admission seemed to cost him something, but Keanu's expression remained unchanged, his hands steady on the wheel. "I know the place," Keanu said softly. "Good people there." The simple acknowledgement, free of pity or judgment, caused Thomas to release a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. As they drove, the city's glamorous facade gave way to quieter, more humble streets. Thomas's hands had relaxed their death grip on the grocery bags, and something in his posture had begun to ease. "You know," he started, then stopped, as if surprised by his own desire to speak. "Go on," Keanu encouraged, his voice gentle but firm. "I used to drive a car like this," Thomas continued, his words carrying the weight of buried memories. "Back when I was working in the industry, before everything changed." He ran his hand along the leather armrest, lost in recollection. Keanu's attention sharpened, though his expression remained calm. "You worked in film? Production design?" Thomas nodded, a flicker of pride crossing his features. 20 years, dozens of projects. Won an Art Directors Guild Award in '98 for a period piece you probably never saw. He laughed softly, but the sound held more pain than humor. "What happened?" Keanu asked, the question simple but loaded with understanding. In Hollywood, he'd seen countless stories of swift falls from grace. Thomas was quiet for so long that Keanu thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Depression, anxiety, the pressure of maintaining perfection in an industry that demands it. I started self-medicating, made some bad decisions, burned some bridges. He shrugged, the gesture attempting to make light of what had clearly been a devastating descent. One day, I woke up and realized I'd lost everything: my career, my home, my family. Pride keeps you from asking for help until it's too late. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, and the streets were nearly empty now. Keanu navigated through the quiet neighborhoods with careful attention, giving Thomas space to tell his story. The connection forming between them was delicate, built on shared understanding of the industry's darker sides and the universal human experience of loss and redemption. Pride's a tricky thing, Keanu offered finally. Sometimes it keeps us standing when everything else falls away. Sometimes it's what makes us fall in the first place. He glanced at Thomas, noting how the streetlights caught the silver in his hair, the lines of hardship etched around his eyes. But it doesn't have to be what keeps us down. The Porsche slowed as they approached Valencia Street, but instead of turning toward the shelter, Keanu guided the car into the parking lot of a small, family-owned diner. The neon sign cast a warm glow through the rain-streaked windows, illuminating the nearly empty interior. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat, confusion evident on his face. "I thought," he began, but Keanu was already turning off the engine. "Sometimes conversations need a proper setting," Keanu said quietly. "And I haven't had dinner yet. Would you join me?" The invitation hung in the air, weighted with possibility. Thomas glanced down at his worn clothes, then at his grocery bags, a lifetime of pride warring with his current circumstances. I don't have," Thomas started, but Keanu was already opening his door. "Tonight's about conversation, not charity," Keanu stated firmly. "And something tells me you have stories worth hearing." The simple dignity in those words seemed to reach something deep inside Thomas, and after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Inside, the diner was warm and smelled of coffee and grilled onions. The elderly waitress, Maria, barely blinked at the unusual pair, a Hollywood star and a homeless man settling into a corner booth. She simply brought them menus and fresh coffee, her kind eyes noting how carefully Thomas placed his grocery bags beside him. "You mentioned production design," Keanu said after they'd ordered, his hands wrapped around the warm coffee mug. "Which projects?" Thomas's eyes lit up with a spark of his old passion. "My last big project was Midnight in Manhattan. The Art Deco details nearly drove me insane, but we won several awards for authenticity." He paused, a shadow crossing his face. "That was right before everything fell apart." Keanu leaned forward slightly. "I remember that film. The attention to detail was extraordinary, especially the speakeasy scenes. The way the light played off the brass fixtures, the period-accurate wallpaper patterns." Thomas's eyes widened in surprise. "You noticed that? Most people don't." His voice trailed off as memories flooded back. "We spent weeks researching authentic 1920s lighting fixtures. Had them custom-made in Brooklyn." As their food arrived, Thomas began to speak more freely, describing the intricate challenges of creating authentic period sets, the joy of seeing his visions come to life on screen. His hands moved animatedly as he talked, years of hardship momentarily falling away to reveal the passionate artist beneath. "But then the pressure started building," he continued, his voice growing quieter. "Each project had to be bigger, better, more perfect than the last. The anxiety, it became overwhelming. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, started taking pills to calm down, then more pills to focus, then alcohol to take the edge off the pills." Keanu listened intently, recognizing the familiar spiral that had claimed so many talented people in the industry. "The industry can be merciless," he acknowledged. "We're all expected to be perfect all the time." Thomas nodded, pushing his half-eaten burger aside. "One day, I missed an important production meeting, was too hungover to function. The studio, they were understanding at first, but after the third time," he shook his head. "Word gets around fast in this business. Soon, no one would hire me. My wife left, took our daughter. I couldn't make the mortgage payments. And then you found yourself on the streets, Keanu finished softly. 5 years ago now, Thomas confirmed, his voice barely above a whisper. I tried rehab twice, but without insurance, without support, it's easy to fall back into old patterns when you're sleeping under bridges. The diner had grown quieter, the few remaining customers having dwindled away. Maria refilled their coffee cups, her movements gentle and unobtrusive. Keanu sat in thoughtful silence for a moment, studying the man across from him. You still have the eye, he said finally. Thomas looked up, confused. The way you described those sets, the passion in your voice when you talked about the details, that doesn't go away. Talent doesn't disappear just because we lose our way for a while. Thomas's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. Kind words, Mr. Reeves, but Hollywood doesn't give third chances. Not to people like me. Maybe it's time we change that, Keanu replied, pulling out his phone. If you're willing to try again, really try. I know some people who might be interested in your talent. He paused, making sure he had Thomas's full attention. But first, we need to get you proper help. Real support this time, not just a quick fix. Thomas stared at him, emotions warring across his face. Hope, fear, disbelief, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of the pride that had once defined him. Why? He asked finally. Why would you do this for a stranger? Keanu's response was immediate and sincere. Because 20 years ago, someone took a chance on me when I was struggling. They didn't have to, but they did. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person believing in you when you've forgotten how to believe in yourself. The neon lights of the diner cast long shadows across the table as Keanu pulled out his phone. His fingers moved swiftly over the screen, but his eyes kept returning to Thomas, gauging the man's emotional state. This moment required delicate handling. Too much pressure could overwhelm someone who'd grown accustomed to life's hardest edges. Too little might not break through years of built-up defenses. I know a rehabilitation center in Malibu, Keanu said, his voice measured and calm. Private, discreet, with a specialized program for industry professionals. They understand the unique pressures that led you here. He paused, watching Thomas's expression carefully. The program runs for 90 days. Full medical support, therapy, and most importantly, a career rehabilitation component. Thomas's hands clutched his coffee cup, knuckles white with tension. Mr. Reeves, I appreciate the gesture, but I can't possibly afford. Let me worry about that, Keanu interrupted gently. Consider it an investment in talent. The industry loses too many brilliant minds to its darker sides. Maybe it's time we started bringing some of them back. He pressed a few more buttons on his phone, then held it to his ear. Despite the late hour, the call was answered almost immediately. David? Yeah, it's Keanu. Listen, I know it's late, but I need a favor. He glanced at Thomas as he spoke. Remember that production designer we talked about for the new project? I think I found someone better. Thomas's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. Keanu continued his conversation, his free hand raised slightly, asking for patience. Yes, he's got the experience. Won an Art Directors Guild Award. No, there's a backstory, but that's why I'm calling. We need to do this right. He listened for a moment. Exactly. 90 days at Cliffside, then we talk business. I'll personally vouch for him. The call ended, and Keanu placed his phone face down on the table. David Morton, executive producer I've worked with several times. He's been looking for someone with a real eye for period detail for his new historical drama series. He leaned forward slightly. The job's yours if you want it, Thomas. After the program, Thomas sat in stunned silence, his coffee forgotten. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. I don't know what to say. It's too much. Too generous. It's not generosity, Keanu corrected firmly. It's recognition of talent and an opportunity to right some wrongs. The industry chews people up, and spits them out, then acts surprised when they fall. Maybe it's time we change that narrative. He pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal assistant's number. Tomorrow morning, she'll arrange transportation to Cliffside. They're expecting you. He slid the card across the table. The choice is yours, Thomas. No pressure, no judgment if you say no. But if you're ready to try again, really try. There are people willing to help. Thomas picked up the card with trembling fingers, staring at it as if it might disappear. My groceries, he said weakly, gesturing to the bags beside him. We'll drop them at the shelter, Keanu replied. I'm sure there are others who could use them. He signaled to Maria for the check. You don't have to decide right now. Sleep on it. The offer stands until tomorrow evening. As they stood to leave, Thomas suddenly reached out, catching Keanu's sleeve. Why did you stop tonight? Out of all the people who drove past, why did you? Keanu was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because 20 years ago, I was in a dark place too. Different circumstances, same darkness. Someone stopped for me, changed my whole life with one act of kindness. Maybe tonight was my chance to pass that forward. The rain had stopped when they stepped outside, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. As they got back into the car, both men knew that regardless of Thomas's decision, something profound had shifted in the universe that night. A reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come not from grand gestures, but from simply stopping to help someone carry their groceries home. The sun rose over Cliffside Rehabilitation Center 90 days after that fateful rainy night. Thomas stood at the window of his room, watching the Pacific waves crash against the shore below. His reflection in the glass showed a transformed man. Clear eyes, proper haircut, and clothes that fit both his frame and his renewed dignity. The tremor in his hands had disappeared weeks ago, replaced by the steady grip that had once sketched award-winning set designs. The rehabilitation process hadn't been easy. The first week was filled with physical withdrawal symptoms that left him shaking and desperate. But unlike his previous attempts at recovery, this time he had support. The center's medical team guided him through the worst of it, while their therapists helped him confront the deeper wounds that had led to his downfall. Each day brought new challenges and small victories. Morning group sessions taught him he wasn't alone. Other industry professionals shared similar stories of pressure, perfectionism, and pain. Afternoon art therapy sessions reconnected him with his creative spark. The center's career counselor helped him rebuild his portfolio, showing him how to address the gap in his employment history honestly, while emphasizing his continued passion for the craft. Keanu kept his word. Every 2 weeks, Thomas received updates about the upcoming project through Keanu's assistant. Production meetings were being delayed until his release, scripts were being held for his review, and most importantly, people were excited about working with him. These messages became anchors, reminding him that a future waited beyond the center's walls. During his 3rd month of treatment, Thomas received an unexpected visitor. David Morton, the executive producer Keanu had called that night, arrived with preliminary sketches for the historical drama series. For 3 hours, they sat in the center's garden, discussing period-accurate architectural details and the challenges of recreating 1940s Los Angeles. Thomas's hands flew across paper as he sketched alternatives, his talent flowing freely without the clouds of addiction. "You've still got it," David had said, gathering the sketches. "Maybe even more than before. There's something raw and honest in these designs that wasn't there in your earlier work." The center's director, Hannah Whitlock, had become another unexpected ally. She specialized in treating creative professionals and understood the unique pressures they faced. "Your story isn't uncommon," she told him during their final session. "What's uncommon is getting a second chance like this. But more uncommon still is someone who's ready to make the most of it." Thomas had worked with the center's financial counselor to create a sustainable budget plan. His new contract, negotiated with help from an industry advocate, included health insurance and reasonable deadlines. The salary would allow him to rent a small apartment near the studio, with enough left over to start rebuilding his savings. Most importantly, it included a clause requiring regular check-ins with a therapist and addiction specialist. Now, standing at the window on his last morning at Cliffside, Thomas held a small notebook. Inside were the names and phone numbers of his support group members, therapist appointments, and most importantly, a handwritten note from Keanu that had arrived yesterday. The hardest part isn't falling down. It's believing you deserve to get back up. You do. See you Monday. The center staff had gathered to bid him farewell. Maria, his art therapist, handed him a portfolio containing 90 days' worth of sketches. His journey from shaky lines to confident designs documented in pencil and paper. Whitlock gave him a firm handshake and a reminder of their scheduled check-ins. Even the kitchen staff, who had watched him progress from barely touching food to rediscovering his appetite, prepared a special breakfast. As Thomas walked toward the car waiting to take him to his new apartment, he carried more than just his belongings. He carried hope, hard-earned wisdom, and the knowledge that rock bottom wasn't the end of his story. It was just a foundation for rebuilding something stronger. The morning sun caught his face, and for the first time in years, he didn't flinch from its brightness. Instead, he turned toward it, ready to begin again. 1 year after that rainy night encounter, the story of Keanu Reeves and Thomas Sullivan had become more than just another Hollywood tale of redemption. The historical drama series, Golden Age, premiered to critical acclaim, with Thomas's meticulously crafted sets receiving particular praise. Critics marveled at the authenticity of his 1940s Los Angeles streetscapes, each storefront and interior telling its own story of a bygone era. But the real impact reached far beyond the entertainment industry. Thomas's journey inspired a transformation in how Hollywood approached mental health and addiction recovery. Keanu, working quietly behind the scenes, helped establish the Second Act Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping industry professionals find their way back from similar struggles. The foundation provided not just rehabilitation support, but also mentorship and job placement assistance. Thomas became a regular speaker at industry events, sharing his story with unflinching honesty. His talks weren't just about his fall from grace. They focused on the systemic pressures that drove many talented professionals toward similar fates. Production companies began implementing mental health support systems and reasonable working hours, recognizing that talent needed nurturing, not just demanding. The friendship between Keanu and Thomas deepened into a genuine partnership. They collaborated on multiple projects, with Thomas bringing his renewed creative vision to several of Keanu's productions. Their weekly coffee meetings at the same diner, where everything changed, became a tradition, with Maria the waitress now saving their corner booth every Tuesday morning. Perhaps the most profound change came in Thomas's personal life. His daughter, now in college, reached out after seeing an interview where he discussed his recovery. Their reconciliation was slow, built on honest conversations and shared meals, but it grew stronger with each passing month. She even began interning in the art department during her summer breaks, working alongside her father and learning the craft that had once been his downfall. The ripple effects continued to spread. Other celebrities began following Keanu's example, looking beyond simple charity to find ways of making lasting change in people's lives. The industry's attitude toward recovery shifted from whispered stigma to open support. Production designers who had once hidden their struggles came forward, finding strength in Thomas's example and hope in the support systems now available. Thomas kept his promise to stay clean, attending regular therapy sessions and support group meetings. He became a mentor himself, guiding others through the early stages of recovery with the same patience and understanding that had been shown to him. His office wall displayed not just his industry awards, but also his 1-year sobriety chip, both symbols of achievement, both equally valued. The story of that rainy night encounter continued to be shared, not as a tale of celebrity kindness, but as proof that sometimes the greatest acts of humanity come from simply stopping to help someone carry their burden. It served as a reminder that talent never truly dies, and that sometimes all it takes to reignite a spark is one person willing to believe in second chances. As for Keanu and Thomas, they never sought publicity for their friendship or the changes it sparked. They simply continued their work, both on screen and behind the scenes, proving that in an industry often criticized for its superficiality, real connections and genuine kindness could still thrive and transform lives in unexpected ways.